Jake Martinez stared at the blinking red light on his console and rubbed his tired eyes. He had been on duty for 12 hours straight, monitoring the empty space around the Outer Rim territories. Most days, nothing happened out here. Most days. He wished something would. The human exploration vessel New Horizon drifted slowly through the dark between stars. It was not a big ship, only 200 meters long, with a crew of just 40 people. Jake served as the communications officer, which meant he spent most of his time listening to static and checking for messages that never came. "Another quiet day in paradise," Pete Collins said from the engineering station. Pete was a short man with grease-stained hands who could fix anything that broke on the ship. He was also Jake's best friend and the only person who complained about the boring patrol duty more than Jake did. "At least we get paid for doing nothing," replied Tony Green from the pilot's seat. Tony was younger than both of them, fresh out of the academy, and still excited about flying in deep space. Jake envied that excitement. He remembered when he felt the same way. The red light blinked faster. Jake frowned and leaned forward to check his instruments. Someone was trying to send them a message, but the signal was very weak and full of interference. He adjusted the receivers and tried to clean up the transmission. Static filled his headphones, mixed with something that might have been a human voice. Jake worked the controls carefully, trying to pull the message out of the cosmic noise. Slowly, words began to form. "This is Dr. Lisa Adams calling any human vessel in range. Please respond. We are trapped in the Kepler 442 system. They came 3 days ago and destroyed everything. The cities are gone. The ships are gone. Most of the people are gone too." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. The Kepler 442 system had been declared a dead zone by the Galactic Council 6 months ago. No ships were supposed to go there. Anymore. Nothing was supposed to be alive there. The message continued. "I am broadcasting from Research Station Alpha 7 with 36 other survivors. We have maybe 2 weeks of food and water left. The things that attacked us are still out there, searching for anyone who escaped. I do not know if they will find us, but I know they are heading toward the inner systems. Someone needs to warn Earth. Someone needs to stop them before they reach the core worlds." The transmission cut to static again. Jake sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Lisa Adams was a famous scientist who studied alien life forms. She had been assigned to Kepler 442 to research the different species that lived there. If she was still alive, it meant the situation was even worse than anyone thought. "Did you guys hear that?" Jake asked. Pete looked up from his repair work. "Hear what?" "I just picked up a distress call from the Kepler system. There are survivors." Tony turned around in his seat. "That is impossible. The council said everyone died months ago. Some kind of plague or natural disaster." Jake played the message again for them to hear. When it finished, the bridge fell silent. Pete was the first to speak. "That does not sound like any plague I know." "About," he said quietly. "She said something attacked them. Something that destroyed the cities and ships." The communications console beeped, and Captain Amy Rodriguez's voice came through the speakers. "Martinez, report to my ready room immediately." Jake's stomach dropped. The captain's ready room was where crew members went to get lectured or punished. He had been monitoring military frequencies without permission again, which was against regulations. But this time, he had found something important. Captain Rodriguez was a stern woman in her 50s who had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 30 years. She sat behind her desk with her arms crossed and a disapproving look on her face. "I received an automated alert that you accessed restricted communication channels," she said. "Again, I thought we had an understanding about this, Jake." "Captain, I found something you need to hear," Jake said quickly. He played the distress message on his portable unit. Rodriguez listened without saying a word. When it finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That transmission is 6 months old," she said finally. "Just an echo bouncing around the quantum communication network. Dr. Adams is dead, along with everyone else in that system. Ma'am, I checked the quantum signature 3 times. This message was sent less than 8 hours ago. She is still alive." The captain stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. In the distance, Jake could see the faint glow of the Kepler system, just a tiny dot of light among billions of stars. "Even if that is true, we have our orders," Rodriguez said. "We patrol this sector and report anything unusual to Earth Command. We do not go chasing after ghost signals in dead systems. But if there are survivors, then they are already dead by now." The captain turned back to face him. "Jake, I know you are bored out here. We all are. But that does not mean we can abandon our duty to go on rescue missions." Jake felt anger building in his chest. "So we just leave them to die? We follow orders. That is what keeps us alive out here." Rodriguez sat back down at her desk. "Send a report to Earth Command about the transmission. Let them decide what to do about it. That is all." Jake left the ready room feeling frustrated and helpless. By the time Earth Command received his report and decided what to do, Dr. Adams and the other survivors would be dead. The human government was careful and slow to act, especially when it came to dangerous situations in unknown space. He walked back to the bridge and sat down at his station. The red light was still blinking. More messages were coming through, weaker than before. Jake put on his headphones and listened. "Day 47 of the siege," Dr. Adams' voice whispered through the static. "Food supplies are running low. We can hear them outside, searching through the wreckage. They never stop. They consume everything they find. Metal, plastic, organic, matter, even the quantum processing cores from our computers. I have never seen anything like them." Jake's hands tightened on the controls. 47 days. These people had been hiding and fighting for over 6 weeks, while the galaxy thought they were all dead. "If anyone receives this message, please send word to Earth. Tell them the Devourers are real. Tell them they are coming for the core worlds. We found references to them in the old Altarian archives. Ancient machines that eat entire civilizations. We thought they were just myths, but we were wrong. So very wrong." The message faded back to static. Jake sat in the dark, staring at the blinking light, thinking about 37 people hiding in the ruins of their world while monsters hunted them. He looked around the bridge. Pete was back to fixing a broken environmental control panel. Tony was running navigation checks. Neither of them knew about the new message. Neither of them knew that somewhere in the darkness, humans were dying while they sat safely in there. Ship doing nothing. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Jake waited until the night shift took over before he made his move. He found Pete in the engineering bay, working on a broken power coupling by the light of a small lamp. "I need your help with something," Jake said quietly. Pete looked up from his work. "What kind of help?" "The kind that might get us court-martialed." Pete set down his tools and gave Jake his full attention. "I am listening." Jake told him about the second message from Dr. Adams. He explained about the Devourers and the 47 days of siege. When he finished, Pete was quiet for a long time. "You want to go to Kepler 442? Pete said finally. "Those people are going to die if we do nothing. Those people are probably going to die anyway. And we might die with them." Jake nodded. "Probably, but we have to try." Pete looked at the broken power coupling in his hands, then back at Jake. "What do you need me to do? Can you make it look like we have engine problems? Something that would require us to drop out of faster-than-light travel for repairs?" A slow smile spread across Pete's face. "Jake, I can make the ship break down in ways that will amaze you. How long do you need?" "Long enough to reach Kepler 442 and back. That is 3 days each way, plus whatever time we spend there. Can you do it?" Pete stood up and walked to the main engineering console. "Give me 10 minutes." 20 minutes later, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Jake ran to the bridge where Tony was frantically checking his instruments. "What happened?" Jake asked, trying to sound surprised. "Engine failure," Tony replied. "Pete says we have a cascade malfunction in the quantum drive core. We have to drop to normal space immediately, or the whole system will shut down." "Captain." Rodriguez's voice came over the communication system. "All senior staff to the bridge immediately." When everyone had gathered, Pete explained the situation. "The quantum field generators are overheating. If we do not shut down the faster-than-light drive right now, we could lose power to the whole ship." "How long for repairs?" the captain asked. "At least a week, maybe 2. I need to completely rebuild 3 of the primary control circuits." Rodriguez looked frustrated but not suspicious. The New Horizon was an old ship, and engine problems were common. "Very well. Take us out of faster-than-light travel and begin repairs immediately." The ship dropped back into normal space with a shudder that ran through the hull. Jake checked his navigation instruments and smiled. Pete had done his job perfectly. They were exactly where they needed to be to reach the Kepler system. Over the next 6 hours, Jake watched Pete perform the most convincing act of his life. The engineer crawled through maintenance tunnels, replaced perfectly good components with broken ones, and created a mess of sparking wires that looked dangerous but was actually harmless. When the captain came to check on his progress, Pete showed her a burned-out circuit board and shook his head sadly. "This is worse than I thought. The whole system is damaged. It could take 10 days to fix." Rodriguez examined the damage and frowned. "Do whatever you have to do. We cannot afford to be stranded out here." As soon as the captain left, Jake helped Pete clean up the fake damage. Then they went to find Tony in his quarters. "We need to talk," Jake said. Tony looked nervous. "About what?" "About taking a little side trip while Pete fixes the engines." It took an hour to convince Tony to help them. The young pilot was scared of breaking regulations, but he was also curious about the mystery in the Kepler system. Finally, he agreed to help as long as they promised to be back before anyone noticed they were gone. They took one of the ship's small shuttles, telling the duty officer they were going to test the repairs on the engine. It was a believable story. Since Pete often ran tests on his work, the trip to Kepler 442 took 18 hours in the shuttle. As they got closer to the system, Jake tried to contact Dr. Adams again. For a long time, there was no response. Then, just as they were about to give up, a weak signal came through. "This is Research Station Alpha 7. Who is this?" "Dr. Adams, this is Jake Martinez from the human vessel New Horizon. We received your distress call. We are coming to get you." There was a long pause. When Adams spoke again, her voice was shaking. "You came. I cannot believe you actually came. We are about 6 hours away from your position. Are you and the other survivors safe?" "Safe is not the right word. We are alive, but barely. The Devourers have been quiet for the past 2 days, but they are still out there. I can see them moving through the wreckage of the orbital platforms." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What exactly are these Devourers? Machines. Ancient machines that consume everything in their path. They break down matter at the molecular level and use it to build more of themselves. They destroyed 5 different civilizations in this system in less than a week. Tony was piloting the shuttle, but Jake could see him listening to every word. Pete leaned forward from his seat in the back. "How did you survive?" Pete asked. We hid in the deepest levels of the research station. It was built inside an asteroid, so the walls are thick, but they know we are here. They keep sending smaller units to probe our defenses. It is only a matter of time before they find a way in. The shuttle's sensors began picking up debris as they entered the outer edge of the Kepler system. What Jake saw on the screen made his stomach turn. Massive alien ships drifted through space like empty shells. Each one had perfectly round holes eaten through its hull. "My God," Tony whispered. "What could do this to such big ships?" "The Devourers," Adams replied over the radio. "They do not fight like normal enemies. They simply consume everything they touch. Weapons, shields, armor. Nothing can stop them for long." Jake stared at the floating graveyard around them. Hundreds of ships from different species, all reduced to hollow metal shells. He was starting to understand why the Galactic Council had declared this system dead. "Dr. Adams, we are going to get you out of there," he said. "All of you. I hope you can. But you need to know something else. This is not just a local problem. We intercepted communications before the network went down. The Devourers have awakened in other systems, too. They are spreading toward the core worlds like a plague." Jake looked at Pete and Tony. Both men had gone pale. "How many systems?" Jake asked. "At least 12 that we know of. Maybe more by now." The shuttle continued deeper into the dead system, past the remains of once great civilizations. Jake realized they were not just on a rescue mission anymore. They were witnesses to the beginning of something that could destroy the entire galaxy. The research station looked like a metal tumor growing out of the side of a large asteroid. Jake could see blast marks and melted sections where the Devourers had tried to break through the outer hull. Somehow, the station was still intact. Docking. "Bay 7 is still operational," Dr. Adams said over the radio, "but be careful. We have motion sensors showing activity near the south side of the station." Tony guided the shuttle carefully through the debris fields surrounding the asteroid. Pieces of destroyed ships floated everywhere, like a deadly cloud of metal and plastic. Each piece told the story of someone who had tried to fight the Devourers and lost. "There," Pete pointed at a small opening in the station's hull. "That must be the docking bay." The bay doors opened slowly, revealing a dimly lit chamber inside. Tony flew the shuttle through the opening, and the doors closed behind them with a loud clang that echoed through the hull. Jake could see people waiting for them in the bay. They looked thin and tired, wearing dirty clothes and carrying makeshift weapons. A woman with gray hair and a torn lab coat stepped forward as they climbed out of the shuttle. "Dr. Adams?" Jake asked. She nodded. "Thank you for coming. I was not sure anyone would receive our messages." Jake looked around at the other survivors. He counted 36 people from at least 5 different alien species. Most of them were scientists and researchers who had been studying the various civilizations in the Kepler system. "We need to get everyone out of here as quickly as possible," Jake said. "Our shuttle can carry 20 people safely." "That means 2 trips," Pete calculated. "Can this place hold out that long?" Before Adams could answer, a deep grinding sound echoed through the station. The lights flickered and dust fell from the ceiling. "They have found us," Adams said quietly. "The Devourers are trying to cut through the outer hull." A tall blue alien with 4 arms stepped forward. "I am Engineer Crix of the Altarian Republic. We have been monitoring their progress. They will break through in approximately 4 hours. Then we make 2 fast trips," Jake decided. "Tony, you take the first group back to the New Horizon. Pete and I will stay here with the rest." "I am not leaving you guys here," Tony protested. "Someone has to warn Earth Command about what we found here. If something happens to us, you need to make sure the message gets through." Tony looked like he wanted to argue, but another grinding sound from outside made him nod reluctantly. 4 hours? If I am not back by then, I am coming anyway. While Tony loaded the first group of survivors into the shuttle, Adams took Jake and Pete deeper into the station. She wanted to show them what they had learned about the Devourers. The research lab was a mess of broken equipment and scattered papers. Adams led them to a large screen that still worked, showing fuzzy images of the creatures that had destroyed the system. "We managed to capture some video before the main sensors were destroyed," she explained. Jake stared at the screen. The Devourers looked like giant metal spiders, each one the size of a small building. They moved across the surface of destroyed ships, their legs ending in spinning tools that could cut through any material. As they worked, they left behind smaller versions of themselves. They reproduce by consuming matter and converting it into new units, Adams continued. Every ship they destroy makes them stronger. Every city they consume gives them more resources to build with. Pete was studying the technical readouts on another screen. These things are not just random destroyers. They have a plan. Look at this movement pattern. The data showed how the Devourers had systematically attacked each planet in the system. They started with the military bases and communication centers, then moved to the industrial facilities, and finally consumed the civilian populations. They are preparing for something bigger, Jake realized. This whole system was just practice. "We think they are building a fleet," Adams said. "The metal and resources they consumed here will be used to create ships capable of faster-than-light travel. Once they finish, they will spread to other systems." The grinding sound from outside grew louder. Jake could feel vibrations through the floor as the Devourers worked to break through the station's defenses. "How long before Tony gets back?" Pete asked. Jake checked his watch. 2 hours, if everything goes smoothly. "That might not be fast enough," Crick said. The Altarian was monitoring the hull breach on a portable scanner. "They have brought larger cutting tools. The outer barrier will fail in 90 minutes. Adams walked to a storage locker and pulled out several human-made weapons. "We took these from the destroyed ships. They might buy us some time." Jake examined one of the weapons. It was a standard Earth Defense Fleet plasma rifle, designed for fighting other humans in ground combat. Against the Devourers, it would probably be useless. "Wait a minute," Pete said suddenly. He was looking at the power readings from the station's main reactor. "Adams, what kind of power source does this place use?" "Quantum fusion reactor." "Why?" Pete's eyes lit up with an idea. "Jake, remember what happened to the Devourers when they tried to attack the ships with active shields?" Jake thought back to the video footage. They seemed confused when they encountered high-energy fields. "Right. Their coordination broke down. What if we could create a massive energy pulse throughout the station?" Adams shook her head. The reactor is not designed for that kind of output. We would overload every system on the station. But would it work?" Pete pressed. "Would it disrupt the Devourers long enough for Tony to get back?" "Maybe. But the station would be destroyed in the process. We would have no life support, no artificial gravity, no hull integrity." Jake made the same kind of decision he had made. Back on the new horizon. Do it. "Jake, we could all die," Pete warned. "We are going to die anyway if those things get inside. At least this way we have a chance." Pete and Adams worked together to modify the reactor's output controls. They bypassed every safety system and routed all available power to the stations. Hull plating. If their theory was correct, the entire asteroid would become one giant electromagnetic pulse generator. "This is either going to save us or kill us," Pete muttered as he made the final connections. The grinding sound from outside suddenly stopped. For a moment, the station was completely quiet. "They have broken through the outer hull," Crix reported. "I can see them entering the station through multiple breach points." Jake grabbed his plasma rifle and checked the power cell. Around him, the other survivors prepared for a fight they probably could not win. "Ready?" Pete asked, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Do it," Jake said. Pete pushed the switch, and the lights went out. The electromagnetic pulse hit the Devourers like a hammer. Jake could hear them shrieking through the station walls as their coordination systems failed. The sound was horrible, like metal being torn apart mixed with electronic screaming. In the research lab, emergency lighting flickered on, casting red shadows on the walls. The main power was dead, but the backup systems were still working. "It worked," Pete said, staring at his scanner in amazement. The pulse scrambled their network connection. "They are attacking each other." Through the security cameras that still functioned, Jake could see the Devourers in the corridors. The spider-like machines were moving randomly, their cutting tools, slicing into walls and into each other. Without their hive mind to coordinate them, they had become mindless destroyers. "How long will this last?" Adams asked. "Not long enough," Crix replied. "I am detecting new signals from outside the station. More Devourers are coming, and these ones were not affected by the pulse." Jake checked his watch. Tony had been gone for 3 hours. He should be back soon with the shuttle, but the docking bay was now full of confused Devourers. "We need to get to the backup landing pad on level 5, Adams said. "It is smaller, but Tony can dock there if we can clear the way." "How do we get through the corridors with those things wandering around?" Pete asked. Jake had an idea. "The pulse confused them, but they are still programmed to consume metal and technology. What if we give them something more interesting than us?" He pointed to a storage room full of broken equipment and spare parts. "We make a trail of metal debris leading away from the path we need to take. While they are distracted eating that, we sneak past them." It was a dangerous plan, but it was the only one they had. The survivors worked quickly to gather pieces of destroyed machinery and create a path of tempting targets for the Devours. Jake watched through the security cameras as the first Devourer found the trail of metal scraps. The machine immediately began consuming the debris, and soon other Devourers joined it. They seemed to forget about searching for humans as they focused on the easy meal. "Now," Jake whispered. The group moved carefully through the darkened corridors. Jake led the way with his plasma rifle ready, while Pete brought up the rear with a heavy wrench that served as his weapon. The survivors stayed close together, trying not to make any noise. They had almost reached the backup landing pad when disaster struck. A small Devourer, no bigger than a dog, came around a corner and spotted them. It let out a high-pitched signal that echoed through the station. "Run!" Jake shouted. The group sprinted down the corridor as more Devourers responded to the alarm call. Jake could hear their metal legs clicking on the floor behind them as they gave chase. They reached the landing pad just as Tony's shuttle appeared outside the window. But the docking bay doors were sealed shut, and the control panel was sparking with electrical damage. "I can fix it," Pete said, diving under the control console with his tools, and the other armed survivors formed a defensive line at the corridor entrance. The first Devourer appeared, its cutting tools spinning as it advanced toward them. Jake fired his plasma rifle. The energy bolt hit the machine's center mass and made it stagger, but did not stop it. The creature kept coming, leaving a trail of molten metal on the floor. "The weapons are not strong enough," Crix said, firing his own rifle at another Devourer. "Aim for the leg joints," Adams shouted. "That is their weak point." Jake adjusted his aim and fired at the creature's front legs. This time, the plasma bolt severed one of the limbs, and the Devourer crashed to the floor. It was still alive, but could not move properly. More Devourers crowded into the corridor. There were too many of them, and the survivors were running out of ammunition. "Almost got it," Pete yelled from under the control panel. the docking bay doors began to open slowly. Jake could see Tony frantically waving from the shuttle's cockpit, trying to line up for a landing. A large devourer pushed past the smaller ones and charged at Jake. He fired his last plasma bolt, but the creature was too big to stop. Its cutting arms swept toward his head. Crix threw himself between Jake and the machine. The Altarian's forearms grabbed the devourer's cutting tool and held it back, but Jake could see the strain on his blue face. "Get to the shuttle," Crix said. Through gritted teeth, Jake wanted to help, but Adams grabbed his arm. "He is buying us time. Do not waste it." The survivors ran for the shuttle as Tony brought it down in the docking bay. The engines were still running, ready for immediate takeoff. Jake was the last one to board. As he reached the shuttle's ramp, he looked back and saw Crix still fighting the large devourer. The brave alien was losing the battle, but he had given them the time they needed. "We have to go," Tony shouted over the engine noise. "The bay is full of those things." Jake made a decision that would haunt him forever. He pressed the button to close the shuttle's ramp, leaving Crix behind. The shuttle lifted off just as a dozen devourers poured into the docking bay. Through the window, Jake watched the research station grow smaller as they flew away from the owl. "Asteroid, did we get everyone?" Tony asked. Jake counted the survivors in the shuttle. 36 people, representing the last remnants of 5 different civilizations. They were alive, but the cost had been terrible. "We got who we could," he said quietly. As they flew back toward the new horizon, Jake activated the shuttle's long-range communication system. It was time to send a message that would change everything. "This is Commander Jake Martinez, broadcasting on all frequencies to any ship in range," he said into the microphone. "We have discovered a threat that makes every previous war look like a practice exercise. Ancient machines called devourers are consuming entire star systems and moving toward the core worlds. They have destroyed at least 12 systems that we know of, and they are building a fleet to spread further." He paused, thinking about Crix and all the other brave people who had died fighting these monsters. This is not just a human problem, or an alien problem. This threatens every living thing in the galaxy. We need every ship, every weapon, every brilliant mind that exists to fight this threat. We are transmitting our location and requesting immediate assistance." Jake looked at the survivors around him. They came from different worlds and different species, but they all had the same look of determination in their eyes. "We will not surrender. We will not retreat. And we will not let the galaxy die in darkness. This is our promise, and this is our call for help." The message went out across space, traveling faster than light to reach every major world in the galaxy. Jake did not know it yet, but his desperate plea was about to start the largest military mobilization in galactic history. The response to Jake's message came faster than anyone expected. Within 6 hours, ships began appearing throughout the sector. Human vessels arrived first, led by Admiral Steve Parker, commanding a battle fleet of 60 ships from Earth. Stood on the bridge of the new horizon, watching the massive fleet assemble around them. Captain Rodriguez had been angry about their unauthorized mission, but her anger turned to amazement when she saw what they had brought back. 36 survivors from a system everyone thought was dead, she said, shaking her head. And intelligence about a threat that could destroy the galaxy. I suppose I can overlook a few broken regulations. Dr. Adams was working with the fleet's scientists, sharing everything she had learned about the Devourers. Her research was being transmitted to military bases across human space, and from there to the other species in the galaxy. The key is disrupting their coordination, she explained to Admiral Parker during a video conference. They operate as a hive mind. Break that connection, and they become much easier to fight. How do we do that on a large scale? The Admiral asked. Pete stepped forward. We modify our ships to generate electromagnetic pulses. Not just one big pulse like we did at the station, but continuous interference that keeps them confused. Will that work against their entire fleet? It should. But we need to hit them before they finish building their faster-than-light ships. Once they leave this system, they will spread across the galaxy faster than we can stop them. The Admiral nodded. Grimly, how long do we have? Adams checked her calculations. Based on the consumption rate we observed, maybe 2 weeks before they complete their fleet. Jake watched as more ships arrived each day. The Altarians sent their crystal singers, whose harmonic frequencies could disrupt machine systems. The Zephyrians contributed their quantum engineers with advanced shield technology. Even the peaceful Centaurians deployed their massive colony ships as mobile bases. Tony had been promoted to squadron leader and was training other pilots in the tactics. They had learned fighting the Devourers. Forget everything you know about elegant space combat, he told them. These things do not think like us. Use unpredictable movements, random attack patterns, anything that will confuse their targeting systems. By the 10th day, they had assembled the largest multi-species fleet in galactic history. Over 300 ships from 7 different civilizations, all working together under human coordination. Jake found himself accidentally in charge of the entire operation. The other species looked to him as the human who had first encountered the Devourers and survived. Admiral Parker officially made him a commander and put him in charge of tactical planning. I never wanted to be a military leader, Jake told Pete as they prepared for the final battle. None of us wanted this war, Pete replied. But sometimes you do not get to choose what history asks of you. The fleet moved toward the Kepler system in formation. Jake rode in the flagship with Admiral Parker, coordinating the different species and their unique fighting styles. It was like conducting an orchestra where every musician played a different instrument. When they arrived at Kepler 442, Jake was shocked by what he saw. The Devourers had consumed every piece of debris in the system and used it to build a massive construction facility around the star itself. Hundreds of new ships were nearing completion, each one designed for long-range travel. My God, Admiral Parker whispered. If even half of those ships escape, they could reach a dozen systems before we could stop them. Then we make sure none of them escape, Jake said. The battle that followed lasted 3 days and became known as the Battle of Kepler 442. It was unlike any conflict in galactic history. Instead of organized formations and tactical precision, the Allied fleet used chaos as a weapon. Human mining ships rammed Devourer construction platforms while Altarian crystal singers disrupted their communications. Zephyrian engineering vessels used terraforming equipment as weapons, shooting streams of molten rock at enemy ships. Jake coordinated the madness from the flagship, turning the fleet's diversity into an advantage. Every time the Devourers adapted to one type of attack, a different species would hit them with something completely unexpected. The turning point came when Pete figured out how to turn the Devourers' own construction facility against them. By overloading the facility's power core, he created a massive electromagnetic storm that disabled every Devourer in the system. Now, Jake ordered. The combined fleet moved in for the final assault. Ship after ship fired everything they had at the helpless Devourers. The ancient machines that had destroyed entire civilizations were reduced to floating scrap metal. When the battle was over, Jake stood on the bridge of the heavily damaged flagship and looked out at the debris field that had once been the Devourer fleet. The threat to the galaxy was ended, but the cost had been terrible. Nearly 100 ships had been destroyed, and thousands of brave people from all species had died. Admiral Parker put a hand on Jake's shoulder. You did it, Commander. You saved the galaxy. Jake thought about Crix and all the others who had. sacrificed themselves to make this victory possible. We all did it, together. 6 months later, Jake stood on the bridge of a new ship, the Jake Martinez, named in honor of the battle. It was the first vessel built jointly by all 7 species, combining the best technology and ideas from across the galaxy. Captain Amy Rodriguez was now his second in command, and Pete served as chief engineer. Tony had his own ship to command, leading a squadron of mixed-species fighters. They were hunting the last scattered Devourer units in the Outer Rim territories. The main threat was gone, but small groups of the machines still posed a danger to remote colonies. Contact on sensors. The communications officer reported. Distress call from the Rigel system. Jake smiled. Set course for Rigel. Maximum speed. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy had learned an important lesson during those dark weeks. When faced with extinction, you did not call the most advanced species or the most numerous. You called the humans. And the humans answered, bringing with them every friend they could find. The distress call that had started with one man's refusal. To abandon survivors had become the foundation of a new galactic alliance. An alliance built not on politics or trade agreements, but on the simple human belief that no one should face the darkness alone. The stars no longer trembled with fear. They hummed with the sound of allied engines, heading toward the next impossible. Fight that someone somewhere was waiting for help to win.